The battered intercity coach rattled through the night, leaving behind the neon-lit but suffocating embrace of Saigon. Bao rested his head against the window pane, which was held together by crisscrossing layers of duct tape. The roaring engine in his ears could not drown out the hollow buzzing emptiness consuming his mind. At 32, Bao's entire life was packed inside a frayed fabric suitcase. A few simple sets of clothes, a notebook smelling of old ink, and a counterfeit Stradivarius violin he had bought during his penniless student days. He had no money left, no fame, and most importantly, no reason to stay. The art cafe chain project, into which he had poured all his savings and borrowed heavily from friends for the past 3 years, had officially declared bankruptcy on Monday morning. The people who once called him a young millionaire and an entrepreneurial inspiration vanished overnight like soap bubbles. His girlfriend of 5 years also chose to walk away, leaving a brief note, "I cannot gamble my future on someone who has nothing left." Bao did not blame her. He only blamed himself for being too arrogant. The coach pulled into a coastal town in central Vietnam just before dawn. The air, thick with the briny scent of salt and the pungent aroma of sea fish, rushed into the cabin through the wide-open door. Bao stepped down, his legs trembling after more than 10 hours of sitting cramped. This was Gan Du Fishing Village, a place he had visited once during a university volunteer trip. He remembered the houses here with their Enyong-tiled roofs turned ash-gray by sea salt, and the people whose smiles seemed never to have been tarnished by the pressure of KPI metrics or monthly electricity bills. He walked along the dirt path leading to the sea. The rustling waves lapping against the shore in the darkness sounded like an ancient lullaby. Bao looked for a house standing isolated near the old shipyard, where a wooden sign hung creaking under the eaves, Nam Vin Guest House. Old man Nam Vin was a gentleman in his late 60s, with hair as white as cotton, skin tanned dark by the coastal sun and wind, and large, rough hands scarred by fishing lines. He welcomed Bao into the house without asking many questions. Looking at the suitcase and the young city man's haggard face and hollow eyes, he simply patted his shoulder. "Go wash your face and have a bowl of hot scallion porridge to warm your stomach, son. The sea here is vast, no matter how big a matter is. Throw it into the ocean and it will sink to the bottom in a few days." Bao's room was on the mezzanine of the wooden house. The window looked straight out onto the beach where basket boats were preparing to set sail. That morning, Bao did not sleep. He sat with his knees pulled to his chest on the bamboo bed, watching the first rays of the new day tear through the mist over the sea, painting the horizon in shades of pink. For the first time in years, he didn't have to open his phone to check emails at 6 a.m. For the first time, he heard the chirping of seagulls on the roof instead of the blaring car horns from the streets below. During his first week in Gan Du, Bao lived like a ghost. He wandered aimlessly along the beach from early morning until sunset, his bare feet sinking into the wet sand. His mind was a chaotic jumble of memories, tense meetings, shouting creditors, and the disappointed looks from his parents back home. He saw himself as a miserable failure, a ruin of haste. One afternoon, as he sat dazed on a piece of driftwood washed ashore, old man Nam Bin walked past, carrying a bamboo basket filled with chiseling tools. He called out loudly, "Bao, if you're free, come over to the shipyard and give me a hand." A young man shouldn't sit around looking as soggy as a dipped rice cracker all day. Startled and somewhat hesitant, Bao stood up and followed. Mr. Nam's shipyard was actually a large palm leaf shelter where he and a few elderly shipwrights in the village were restoring an old wooden fishing boat with a punctured hull. Bao's job was simple but demanded patience, using sandpaper to rub down the wooden surface of the hole to prepare it for a new coat of salt-resistant paint. At first, Bao's soft hands, accustomed only to typing on keyboards and holding a violin bow, quickly blistered. The burning sensation when wood dust mixed with salty sweat stung his raw skin made him want to quit. But seeing old man Nam Bin, a man over 60 still swinging his hammer with agility, a rustic pipe tobacco cigarette in his mouth, his eyes shining with pride as he admired every grain of wood, Bao gritted his teeth and pushed on. "Do you know why shipwood is so durable?" Mr. Nam asked, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. "Is it because it's high-quality wood, sir?" Bao replied, his hands never stopping. "Wrong. Even good wood, if it isn't soaked in salt water, dried thoroughly in the sun to drain its sap, and painfully chiseled, will rot after just a few days in the water. Human beings are the same, son. A man who hasn't been battered by the waves, whose heart hasn't been stung by salt, is not yet a true man. Your fall in the city, to me, is just like when this piece of wood is chiseled away of its excess to reveal its toughest core." Mr. Nam Bin's words felt like an electric current running down Bao's spine. He looked down at his blistered, bleeding hands. It turned out that for a long time, he had only pampered his glamorous outer shell while forgetting to forge his inner core. That night, after washing up with cool well water, Bao opened his suitcase. He lifted the violin. He hadn't touched it in nearly half a year. The humid coastal climate had loosened the strings. He carefully turned each peg, pressing his ear to the body of the violin to listen to the pitch. He stepped out under the old eaves of Nam Bin's guest house. The night sky was filled with stars, a faint Milky Way stretching across the sea. Bao placed the violin on his shoulder, closed his eyes, and drew the first note. It was a nameless piece, slow and melancholy, yet laced with a subtle yearning. The slender, melodious voice of the violin blended with the growling of the ocean waves, creating a strange harmony. From inside the house, Mr. Nam Bin stopped smoking and quietly stepped to the door, watching the slender back of the young man under the moonlight. The entire Gandu fishing village, usually accustomed only to the roar of engines, the sound of waves, and the curses of drunken men, suddenly welcomed a sound so pure, like a stream of fresh, cool water nourishing the arid stretch of sand. Bao's life began to find a new rhythm. In the mornings, he worked at the shipyard with Mr. Nam. In the afternoons, he helped the village women untangle nets and sort fish by the shore. Here, he met a girl named In. In was 5 years younger than Bao. She did not possess the elegant, sharp beauty of the city girls Bao used to know, and had healthy, sun-kissed skin, neatly tied-up hair, and dark eyes that were always brimming with vitality. And was mute from birth. She communicated with the world through her swift hands and a radiant smile featuring a charming snaggletooth. Anne's mother had passed away early, and her father was a severely alcoholic fisherman who often went missing at sea for days on end, and carried the entire family on her shoulders, taking care of her 5th-grade younger brother. Despite such a harsh life, Bao had never seen In cry or complain. Whenever she met Bao, she would sign a greeting to him, then hand him a cool king coconut or a few fresh swimming crabs she had just caught. Bao's life began to find a new rhythm. In the mornings, he worked at the shipyard with Mr. Nam. In the afternoons, he helped the village women untangle nets and sort fish by the shore. Here, he met a girl named In. In was 5 years younger than Bao. She did not possess the elegant, sharp beauty of the city girls Bao used to know, and had healthy, sun-kissed skin, neatly tied-up hair, and dark eyes that were always brimming with vitality, and was mute from birth. She communicated with the world through her swift hands and a radiant smile featuring a charming snaggletooth. Anne's mother had passed away early, and her father was a severely alcoholic fisherman who often went missing at sea for days on end. Anne carried the entire family on her shoulders, taking care of her fifth-grade younger brother. Despite such a harsh life, Bao had never seen Anne cry or complain. Whenever she met Bao, she would sign a greeting to him, then hand him a cool king coconut or a few fresh swimming crabs she had just caught. One day, a heavy storm struck. The first typhoon of the season swept through the fishing village. The wind howled through the gaps in the wooden doors like a grieving ghost. Bao sat in his room, pacing anxiously as he thought of Anne's dilapidated house right next to the cliff. Unable to bear the worry, he threw on a thin raincoat and rushed out into the thunder and lightning. When he arrived, he saw Anne trying all by herself to use sandbags to secure the corrugated iron roof, which was being violently whipped by the gale, threatening to fly into the sky. Her little brother was crying hysterically in a corner of the house out of fear. Rainwater had already flooded the house up to their ankles. Bao plunged in immediately. He climbed onto the roof within, braving the heavy raindrops that pelted his face like thrown stones, stinging sharply. The two worked in tandem, one passing the sandbags, the other pinning down the purlins. After more than an hour of battling the raging storm, the roof was finally secured. They stepped down into the house, soaked to the bone and exhausted, and looked at Bao, her face smeared with mud and rainwater, but her eyes shone with boundless gratitude. She crossed her hands over each other and bowed her head slightly, her sign for thank you. Bao smiled, a truly relaxed smile after a long string of gloomy days. He realized that his self-worth did not lie in how much money he made or how many shares he owned, but in his ability to shelter someone during the storms of life. After that stormy night, the bond between Bao and Anne's family grew closer. Every evening, Anne would bring her younger brother over to Mr. Nam Bin's guest house to listen to Bao play the violin. Bao discovered something miraculous, and could not hear with her ears in the conventional way, but she could feel the music. When Bao played low, sorrowful notes, Anne would gently lower her head, her eyes tinged with sadness. When he played cheerful, fast-paced melodies, she would tap her bare feet on the wooden floor, her face bright and radiant. She sensed the vibrations of the violin through the air and through the wooden floor planks. It was Anne who reawakened a desire in Bao that he thought had died, the desire to create. Bao started writing music again. Not catchy, commercial tunes to make money, but a symphony dedicated solely to Gandu Fishing Village. He wove the whispering sea waves into the opening bars, infused the rhythmic clanking of Mr. Nam Bin's hammer into the climax, and placed Anne's silent yet warm smile into the gentlest concluding notes. One evening, when the piece was finished, Bao invited all the villagers, the shipwrights, the women mending nets, and even the smudge-faced children, to the porch of Mr. Nam Bin's house. Under the flickering light of a storm lantern and the golden moonlight reflecting off the sea, Bao stood there, confident and serene. He was no longer wearing expensive suits, just a faded button-down shirt and jeans with rolled-up cuffs. He began to play. The voice of the violin soared, flying past the old eaves, blending into the sea breeze, and spreading through the air. The villagers listened in absolute silence. They saw their own lives in his music, the hardships and bitterness of long voyages facing storms, the bursting joy when the boat was filled with fish, and the peace of a warm hearth after the storm had passed. When the final note echoed and then dissolved into the sound of the waves, the entire space fell silent for a few seconds before thunderous applause, cheers, and shouts broke through the night. and stood in the front row, tears of happiness rolling down her cheeks. She raised her hands, making not just the usual thank you sign, but forming a heart shape directed toward him.